When you have diabetes, you truly can do anything, including playing for the NBA. So we're going to get into this and a lot more on today's edition of the Taking Control of Your Diabetes podcast. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Jeremy Pettus. I am joined as always by my good friend and colleague,
Dr. Steve Edelman.
So if you're just tuning in, Steve and I both have type 1 diabetes. We were diagnosed at the age of 15. We're both adult endocrinologists, University of California, San Diego, and work for the not-for-profit TCOID that Steve founded about 30 years ago.
About.
So we're going to introduce our very special guest in a second here, Gary Forbes, who is an NBA player living with type 1 diabetes. And we wanted to set up this topic really obviously to hear his story, which is very compelling, but to let people know that, yes, if you have diabetes, even type 1 diabetes, you can achieve even this kind of like excellence at all these different levels, including joining the NBA, but also aside from being an NBA player, which let's face it, Steve, that time has passed for you and I, how do you exercise with diabetes? How do you manage the lows and highs, in managing insulin and all these things? We always say that exercise is potentially the most difficult thing that we struggle with. It's good for you. You got to do it. You got to move. It makes you feel better. But man, it can make your blood sugars go on a roller coaster. Anything to add there?
I would say no. A lot of people think, well, exercise is great if you have diabetes, but it can really mess up your control. Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine, Gary, you'll tell us your story, but the intensity of the exercise, there's the resting, the intensity, and then you got to deal with coaches and all these other people that are watching everything you do, how many points you score, how many steals you get, so it's got to be a lot of pressure too. And you played for a number of years.
I was going to say, so Gary, type 1 diabetic, we're going to get into when he was diagnosed, former professional NBA player, played with the Rockets, Nuggets, Toronto Raptors, Brooklyn Nets. Also, and I want to hear a lot about this, Gary, founder and publisher of The Soul Survivors, a comic book series geared to empower kids who face chronic health challenges. Kudos to you to using your platform for such a noble cause. So tell us, say hi, tell us about yourself, get into your story.
You guys doing? I am happy to be here. It's an honor, and thank you guys for having me. Like everybody said, Gary Forbes, played in the NBA for a couple of years, played professionally, total 12 years, all across the world, been to different countries like Asia, Italy, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, pretty much got my passport stamped a lot. But I am one of 3 players to have ever played in the NBA with type 1 diabetes and the only African-American Afro-Latino to ever play in the NBA first. I'm sure there's going to be many more, after me, and I hope so to see that. And I would, very happy to have laid the foundation for anyone that's following behind me.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that stat. I mean, obviously there's others in the NFL too, and all these other things, but that's pretty impressive first.
Gary, give us a couple lines. Where were you raised? What?
So I was born in Colon, Panama. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Panama, but it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. Obviously, I'm biased. Raised in Brooklyn, New York. And I went to college at the University of Virginia first, then transferred to the University of Massachusetts. And then my professional career began.
Well, tell us. So you glossed over something important that happened when you were at the University of Virginia. So you're 19.
Yes, I'm 19.
You come down with diabetes. You probably had no idea what that was. So walk us through that. What was that like?
I did have a little awareness of it. My father was a type 1 diabetic.
Really?
My grandfather passed away from it before I was born, but my father was a type 1 diabetic. He was an Olympic lifter, cyclist, worked on the Panama Canal.
Wow.
So I think for me, having my father as my, my hero, basically the superhero to look at and not see any weakness, not see, he never wanted me to have a, oh, woe is me, feel bad for me because I have, this challenge or whatever. Being, West Indian, how we grew up, you just face whatever the challenge is head on and, you figure it out. And
Opposite of weakness, right? I mean, he's an Olympic
yes.
lifter, for crying out loud.
Yeah, man. He's a strong guy, man.
And you didn't want to piss him off either,
That too. He's big on representing your name and what you stand for. So anything that I was ever going through, he'd always say, "Hey, you're Forbes." So whatever your last name is, I'm sure if my last name was, Williams, he would have been saying, "You're a Williams," but he always said, "You're a Forbes. You can do anything." And he implemented that. I didn't realize these little things that he was saying would help me in my experience living in life as an adult, all through, my athletic career. And he was just doing it just, how he lived. And, he was filling me with optimism. I think that's my superpower. It's like whatever I go through, I always have an optimistic belief that, I can and I will.
And you'll do the same with your new son. So congrats on that.
Yes, I'm already doing that.
We were just talking that you have a 13.5-week-old son at home before we started. But so, all right. So you're 19, and I'm going to guess you start getting thirsty. You start peeing. You start maybe losing some weight. Maybe your vision's a little blurry. Did you say, okay, here we go? Or did you know what it was?
So I'm at the University of Virginia, and I remember we were drinking these Gatorade protein shakes. I was lifting. We were doing, obviously, our lifts. I went into college at 189 pounds. So I was super, super skinny. Well, not super skinny, but a little, not as big as I would have wanted to be going into college. But I was thinking, man, I'm playing in the ACC, playing against Dukes, North Carolinas, all these, big time, universities. And I wanted to, be strong enough to hold my own and, be the best that I could. And I remember my father would always tell me, you got to look at the back of the nutrition facts on the back. And I remember there was 56 grams of sugar and another like 36 grams of added sugar in it, along with the carbs. And he was like, "Oh, you don't need to drink that. And, you can get it from other places." And I'm obviously being a 19-year-old and stubborn and hard-headed. I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about, Dad. Like, I got this. These are trainers. They know what they're talking about. And after my freshman year, I was 225 pounds. So I gained around 35 pounds in a year. Obviously my father is an Olympic lifter, so I knew all the tricks to, lifting and getting bigger and stronger. And I remember that summer when I went home for a break, going home, and I'm literally drinking gallons of water a day. And then literally right after I drank the gallon of water, I have to go to the bathroom. Yeah. And I remember the first day, check my weight. I'm like, all right, I'm 221. Second day, 217. So I'm thinking, oh man, I'm probably not working out enough. Go work out, lift. I eat, big plate of food. Next day, 212. By the end of the week, I was 192 pounds.
Wow.
So like my face had sunken in, everything, I just felt dry. I was like, just confused. I almost I thought I had a urinary tract infection, how many times I was going to the bathroom. And I remember on my ride back to school, my brother, one of my older brothers, he was driving me back to school. And I was like, we had to pull over to the side of the road. It's a 3-hour drive from Baltimore to Virginia. We maybe pulled over to the side of the road 30 times. And he's just like, what's wrong? He was like, what's wrong with you? He's getting mad at me, like how many times we have to stop and you can't hold it. I'm like, no, I cannot hold it. So we get to University of Virginia. I take the test and, it came out. Actually, I was diagnosed with type 2 at first. I was diagnosed with type 2. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes.
That's worth pausing for a second. Here you are, a 19-year-old, super fit kid with a dad with type 1 diabetes. And I mean, if the red flags aren't there, like to look into type 1, I don't know what else is.
The sad thing is,
we hear so many stories like this. People diagnosed with type 2, they're frustrated. It can go on for years sometimes before they get the right diagnosis. So there really is a lack of awareness in the healthcare community that anybody that's not 4 years old can still get type 1 diabetes. You can get it at any age. And so how did that evolve then? They told you had type 2. I mean, your dad must have stepped in at some point, right? And said, hey,
He,
this doesn't smell right.
I mean, unfortunately, they were living in Atlanta, so I wish he was, there around. I'm sure that he would have went in there and gave him a piece of his mind and, kind of changed things. But I was by myself, living on campus, by myself. So I had to kind of figure it out on my own. So the first year being, living with type 2, I was only taking Lantus insulin at the time. So it's like kind of, they said it's like the honeymoon period. So the first 2-3 months, it was still, I was still eating the same foods. Blood sugar levels were, pretty stable. But I transferred to University of Massachusetts after my sophomore year, and I remember being at practice and I was checking my blood sugar, and I would spike after every single practice, every single meal, and it's like in the 300s every single day, and it's like I'm basically chasing chasing the numbers, and obviously the long acting insulin isn't going to do it as quick as short acting insulin. So take a whole nother test, get re-diagnosed, and I have type 1 diabetes. But I remember after I was diagnosed, after my freshman year, they had the tests, and they wanted to make sure that I knew how to use a syringe, and they tried to make me use it with the saline water, and I was super fearful of syringes and needles. I didn't want to take it. I remember the next day I was sitting in my dorm room, and I missed class that day because I was looking at the vial and the syringe. It's like, I'm not taking this. Like, I'm not doing this. I called the doctor. I asked him, I was like, is there any pill that I can take? Is there something else other than me injecting myself with insulin? And it was like, no. So, but fast forward to being at the University of Massachusetts, great doctors, great team care physicians. It was just amazing to be there, to have that group kind of hold me accountable, to make sure that I was, making the right choices, making the right health choices, make sure that I check my blood sugars before practice, during practice, after practice, making sure we had a kind of a stable level of where I feel comfortable and they also feel comfortable in what I'm doing.
So can I ask then, so it sounds like you're a sophomore, maybe 20 years old when you get the right diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got the supportive staff, but like you mentioned at the top, you're one of 3 NBA players with type 1 diabetes. So were you thinking my life's over, my career's over? Were the coaches telling you that? What was the messaging around
So
this?
the doctor at University of Virginia I can still remember the day I'm sitting in his office. He rolls the blinds down, closes the blinds, and he says, you have diabetes. I'm not sure if, basketball is in your future. Maybe you need to focus on something else. Obviously, you'll still be playing basketball, but, don't put all your eggs in this basket. Mm-hmm. Maybe focus on something else. And I went home. I'm very hard-headed. I was like, I don't think he knows what he's talking about. My dad always had this saying, plan A is plan A. Plan B is to make plan A work all the way to Z. So, plan A was getting to the NBA no matter what. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I knew that I was going to get there.
Wow. Well, okay. So you have this good attitude with it. And again, I think your dad must have been so helpful, at least seeing that you can be an Olympic athlete. So then how did this evolve? Let's say now you're a junior, senior. Get specific about how diabetes affected exercise or vice versa. Like, how did you come to terms with that? Were there some things that you saw? You already mentioned spiking after practice. Was that still your main issue, or what was it?
Yeah, with some certain times, I would obviously, like you said earlier, it was kind of like a roller coaster. We would practice really, really hard with Travis Ford. Travis Ford was a really, really tough coach. We would run a lot in practice, and I had a group. I think the teammates that I had at the University of Massachusetts helped me. Being from New York, you have tough skin. You're able to, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere kind of attitude. But I remember I would have to go to the side to drink, some Powerade or something like that. I'm feeling kind of, a little, woozy a little bit. And they would be like, nothing's wrong with you, but not necessarily being hard on me. They wanted to make sure that I, took care of myself and, kind of made me, it was almost like a challenge to prove them wrong or prove myself right, that I can be out there. I'm still running the same sprints with you guys. I'm still practicing the same amount, and I'm even practicing, working out after practice. But during the games and during practices, the team doctors, we always had a kind of range that I had to be in. It was anywhere from 140 to 180. They wanted me to be in that range to practice and play games. And we would check in the middle of practice. We would check after practice to make sure, either I was still in that range or, if I was low. Obviously they have, snacks and juices for me to take home. So they made sure that I had everything available to me, that no situations, no, occurrences happen.
Let me ask you, Gary, your type of therapy has changed over time, and I'm sure continuous glucose monitoring made a big difference in your life. And could you share with us what you're doing now, and how are you doing whatever you're using?
So I have a CGM. I've been using the CGM now for a year.
That's
Granted,
it?
yes, that's it. That's it. Well, 2 years now. 2 years.
You're a stubborn Forbes, I'll tell you
I
that.
am. I am. I am. I was super, super stubborn. Just figure. I was like, I played in the NBA, so I can figure this out. And I was able to do it. I could tell when my blood sugar was high. I could tell when my blood sugar was low. I had this good feeling, this good relationship with my body, with myself. How, what foods. I was very strict on my diet, obviously playing professional basketball. So I kind of ate the same thing every single day. So I was kind of very strict, and obviously not playing anymore. Going overseas kind of changed that perspective on what foods did to my glucose and, how I was able to manage it. Playing overseas, I remember my first year playing in Italy. Before I left, I was taking 30 units of Lantus a day. I had a sliding scale of maybe 8 to 10 units of Humalog a day with, each meal. So I remember my first couple of practices in Italy, and granted, Italy, they ate a lot of carbs. There's bread, there's pasta, and I was having low blood sugars after every single practice, and I was, kind of, I'm eating pasta. Why is my sugars going? Why are my numbers going up? And I go to the endocrinologist there in Italy. Mind you, there's no team doctors. It's not like in the US where, you have the team doctors there. I had to go to a hospital and, pretty much relearn everything on my own, or not learn everything now on my own, because in college I had, staff and, team doctors basically taking care of me. So that kind of matured me to take health seriously, and my diabetes diagnosis is a lot more serious. I had a lot of low episodes after practice, and I've come to realize that the food is different overseas than it is here. So being overseas, I was able to cut my Lantus in half to 15 units, and I was able to cut my Humalog dose in half. So it was like a 4 to 6 unit scale per meal. So that was a life lesson and a learning lesson in managing my type 1.
Well, yeah, I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking, what a nightmare. Like the things that send my blood sugars reeling are exercise and travel. Exercise, we'll get into, but then travel, like just actually traveling, like, getting on a plane, time zone change, hope that you pack everything that you need. And if I've ever dropped a vial of insulin on the ground, it's been when I've, in a hotel room somewhere and it cracks open and you don't have the doctors around, things like that. And then you're tackling foreign foods that you're not used to, and how's this handle, or, how's it affect your blood sugar? That's a lot to handle. But I want to talk a little bit specifically about exercise. And I think, again, it's tough for so many reasons, but I think people struggle because they want one statement, like
Mm-hmm.
exercise lowers your blood sugar, exercise raises your blood sugar. But it's like a 3 hour conversation on it really depends on the time of day. The people are more insulin resistant in the morning,
Yep.
they're more sensitive at night. So it's easier to go low at night and it's a little bit harder to go low in the morning. And then the intensity of the exercise. So depending on that, you might go low during a game or during practice if you're, taking a little bit easier. If somebody's walking, for example, that might drive them low. But if you're sprinting, that might make your blood sugars go high. So it really depends on the type, the duration, if it's weights versus cardio, all these kinds of things. And did people walk you through this, or did you kind of have to like trial and error, this
Trial
is
and
how
error.
this affects my blood sugar? Yeah.
Everything was trial and error. It's funny that you said walking. I was just walking with my son. I walk with my son every morning. And the other day, I probably didn't walk as early as I usually do, around 8 a.m., but walked him around 10 a.m. And we did maybe a mile to the water and back. And I came back and my blood sugars were tanking. And I'm like, all I did was just walk. I took my long acting, which I do in the morning. And what is the theory when you wake up, as soon as you put your foot on the floor, your blood sugar
Yeah.
spikes?
Yeah, foot on the floor syndrome.
That's
Yeah.
what it's called. Yeah.
And that drove me wild for maybe 2 to 3 months. And I was like, I'll check my blood sugar. Let's say it's like 160. Go, wake up, feet on the floor, and I go brush my teeth. I come back maybe 10 minutes later, it's like 196. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. And, what's happening to my body. But, coming to understand how the foot on the floor syndrome, and, that was very interesting to, go through.
Yeah. And I would say, just like you were saying, you get 3 people with type 1 eating the same thing. For me, again, when I exercise at different times of the day, different effects. So I started doing spin classes. I do a spin class in the morning. I usually go high. Maybe if I'm lucky, my blood sugar will stay kind of like where I want it to be. I do it in the evening. I'm going to go low every time. So just people realizing the effects of the time of day is one thing. The other thing that we preach, I want to get your opinion on this, is that if you're doing a high intensity exercise, which I'm sure an NBA game is, what can happen with people that, they're doing a spin class or they're running or something, as soon as you stop that high intensity exercise, your adrenaline's still going, you're still mobilizing glucose, but you're not burning it. So that's when people can get that spike after exercise. And we preach a cool down. Stretching, walking around the block, things like that. Is that something you've incorporated, or you did, or you do?
Yeah, I've just started to do the cool down sessions after working out because, like you said, my stuff is kind of almost like trial and error. I do work with an endocrinologist now, Gary Shiner.
We know Gary.
Yeah,
He did our podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great guy. And he's gave me a lot of tips. Still learning at being 20 years with with this health challenge. But even the cool down after runs or after lifts. I lift every morning at 5 a.m. That's my routine. I like routine, so that's my routine every morning. I lift, and usually like weights and things like that. Every Wednesday, I have a thing that I post. It's a We Outside Wednesday, so I make sure that I do some cardio outside or any type of outside workouts. And Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday are totally different than Wednesdays. And it's funny because I run 4 or 5 miles every Wednesday, and my sugars kind of stay stable throughout the run. But when I'm lifting, it's either shooting up in the morning. After lifts, it's like you said, the adrenaline is still pumping. And last year, I learned about the liver releasing glycogen. And
wow,
that
you sound like a doctor.
and that was strange to me. And it's like I'm lifting, I'm sweating, I'm burning, all this, all this energy, and how am I not stable, or how am I not even dropping low? Because I'm always carrying some kind of snack in the gym. I have a gym in my building, and I never really have to use it. So it's almost like for the last year was almost like I was chasing my numbers every single time. It's like, my numbers are still going up. I got to take 2 more units of insulin. And then now an hour or two later, now I'm tanking. It's like, all right, now I gotta eat a big bowl of cereal or something like that.
Well, you're saying you're every day at 5 a.m. That's kind of the good news, bad news about diabetes, and particularly type 1, is it responds to routine.
Yeah.
So when you can get in a routine, it can be very helpful. The flip side of that is when you're traveling, you're doing these things that are different. That's when things can get kind of off the rails. So as much as people can, trying to exercise at a certain time of day or certain days, like it seems like you've found your routine, and it just takes one of those variables, one of the 3,000 variables maybe off the table to help you stay like a little bit more in range.
Gary, I'm totally amazed because you've done this being on multiple daily injections. Most of the time you've been pricking your finger because you're so freaking stubborn about CGM. So Gary, when I exercise, I go for a cycling. I have one of these hybrid closed loops where it gives you insulin when you need it, turns off when you don't. And you could do all these pre-exercise settings like reduce your basal. And you're doing this on your own and you're doing a damn good job. So I'm very impressed, and you're self-taught with a little bit of help from others.
Just recently, I just checked my A1C was 7. So yeah, it was 7 the other day. Saying it's still, I'm very tough on myself. 7 is still too high. I mean, when I was playing in the NBA, my A1C was like in the low 6s. So it's something I'm still working on. And even I want all the listeners to even take kind of heed for this. I mean, it works for me. Is I kind of I don't like to put the word disease, behind it, because if you think about a disease, that sounds like something that's I'm never going to be able to get past it or overcome it. Whereas in my storytelling with the soul survivors, I call everything a health challenge, and I feel like humans have such a great power to create. I mean, I created life. So, if I could create life, I can, create my own experience. And, calling something a challenge, it almost gives you this feeling that I can overcome this versus, man, I have a disease. It's like, man, this is something that I can't overcome, or something that's too difficult for me.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So
can I just say one quick thing,
Yeah.
Jeremy? You mentioned about 7. A1C and 7 is excellent. So, I wouldn't beat yourself up for that. And I would guess that you had lower A1Cs when you were playing because you probably had more hypos.
Yes.
But that's just a guess. So
Yes.
7 is it's a great number.
Well, and I think, the comment I want to make about that is that, we preach that there's many ways to get to the goals, A1C that you want to be at. And there's a lot of people that kind of feel like they're a bad diabetic if they're not on a pump, the latest, greatest. Look, if you can get to your health goals, doing your system, more power to you. So figure out what works for you. And that's different for different folks. But I did want to ask you mentioned Soul Survivors again. So tell us about that.
Yeah.
How did you create this? Are you drawing these things, or who's drawing them? Like, how's that work?
So I came up with the concepts myself. I'm not a great drawer at all. My tattoo artist actually took my ideas and put it on paper exactly to the concepts that I had. But I was towards the end of my basketball career. I was struggling to figure out what my purpose was. Want to figure out, why am I here? What am I doing? Could have coached basketball, could have went the college route, coaching college basketball, or could have even, coached in the NBA through the coaching programs that they had. But I don't know, I didn't feel like that would wake me up every single day with the same passion that I do with creating Soul Survivors. And, I was looking back at my life experiences, traveling around the world, having these low blood sugar episodes, and, just being, like you said, learning about, this health challenge every single day. It's a new day to, kind of learn about yourself and learn about, diabetes. So I was big on cartoons growing up. I loved watching Thundercats and He-Man and all these, all these different cartoons. So I took those, cartoons and things that I watched, Power Rangers, X-Men. X-Men was one of my favorite cartoons ever growing up. And I wanted to do that for all the health challenges that are in the world, kind of creating a Marvel universe of characters that have health challenges. X-Men were the mutants trying to save the world. And I think, like I said earlier, it's like we all know someone with something, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, there's so many health challenges in the world. And I used to see all these commercials about these different conditions, and it was always the kid in the hospital, it's looking kind of sad. But there's millions of people that overcome these challenges and are doing great things. And, what better way to inspire a child when he's so young and a sponge to, take on, basically whatever you feed this child, whether it be, optimism, pessimism, love, hate, why not feed them with the most positive, reaffirming, affirmations that you possibly can. And I wanted to do that through this graphic comic novel series and empower the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got two guys, you and me, doing really good, just extremely good looking, and Steve, living with these chronic conditions. So tell us, where can people get these?
Yeah.
Are these physical? Are they just online? Both? What's going on?
Yeah,
with
they're
that?
both physical and digital. I would suggest everyone go to www.thesoulsurvivors, survivors.com. And, I sign those and send them out to everyone. And it's more than just a graphic comic novel series. There's a trilogy out now. So there are three out now. The third one just came out for Diabetes Awareness Month. So about the two characters with type 1 and type 2. One of the characters is my story. So he has type 2 at first, and he will eventually, get re-diagnosed in the story to type 1. And it's more than just a comic novel series. It's a lifestyle. It's a movement. I'm creating a marketplace, kind of like a Amazon Alibaba for every single childhood health challenge in the world. I want to create a character for every single, superhero for every single childhood health challenge, and to remove the stigma behind not being able to do something with a health challenge. Because I was told that. And I'm a living testament of proving it wrong. And I want to be an idea. It's like, if Gary Forbes can do it, so can I. And if I'm able to do that, I've done it. I've had many parents, DM me on social media, and it's like, you're such an inspiration. Thank you for being who you are. And I was just doing what I love to do. I love to play basketball. I love to be a positive, outlet for the world. I'm always very optimistic and happy. And if I can change someone's mindset, one person's mindset, I think I've done exactly what I was supposed to do here. So want to obviously expand that and, make the world kind of have that same mindset.
Well, thanks, Gary. I
Wow.
think that's super impactful, and thank you for doing that. And not only using your platform to help others with type 1, but looking beyond that. Sounds like to just these chronic conditions. And, I only have enough room in my heart for just type 1. So I got to start expanding to these other things. I'll get there.
Gary, really, really motivational. Really appreciate listening to you. But don't forget Tom and Jerry. Those two guys.
Jerry was good.
Steve's a different generation. I'm with you with X-Men and
his kids love it when they come over. But we really appreciate it, and we will put your web site up on at least the YouTube screen, and I'm gonna follow from now on.
Yeah, no, Gary, this has been fantastic. We really appreciate you taking the time, everything you're doing. Please stick with it. I know everybody listening is motivated by that story, but also just, if this guy can play in the NBA, I can get out and go for a walk safely with my diabetes. Realize it's still going to be a struggle, but it can be done. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could, I live by cliche sayings. So one of the things that I always kind of say to myself every single day, doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith, which is in the comic book series. Also, your present situation is not your final destination. So for everyone that's going through challenges, know that there's always a hope for a better tomorrow. Just being optimistic, and if you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you're also right. So it's your choice.
Love it.
Wow.
Yeah, that sounds like a poster you slap right before you go out on the court,
That's awesome. Gary, it's been awesome speaking to you.
Yeah,
really
love
has.
it. Thank you so
Thank
much. Hope to maybe do this again, something else with you in the future. But we really appreciate
for sure.
Taking the time. So if you're listening, like, subscribe, follow, send this to your friends, all that kind of stuff. And we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks so much.